Let's dive into the mailbag this week where the questions are real, but the names and locations usually aren't real. But in this case, it's kind of partially not true now. We have two questions this week. One of them was a comment on one of our videos, and the other one I'll get to in just a second from Strong Coffee Marketing's very first ever client, way back when. So we'll get to that question in just a second. First up, a question from at Jim E9243 on YouTube. Thank
a real
you,
person,
Jim
by the way.
E9. He appears real. He or she appears real. Don't know where Jim E is from, but I'm going to say Tucson. That's my guess. It would just make sense. It would align with what we're doing
Perfect.
here. The question: I use AI daily. Maybe you could run a video on how to handle errors, which I get virtually every time. This includes a loss of communication and other error messages that require regen. No matter what time of the day of the week, different computers, different browsers, deletion of cookies and cache, no matter what tool I'm using, this is in uppercase. Errors, always errors. Jimmy is having some trouble with AI tools. Now, we can't provide you tech support on these tools because we didn't build them, but I think we perhaps have a couple of suggestions, and I'm going to turn it over to the two of you who work with these tools far more regularly than I do about potential things that Jim E could do to get around these errors that he or she is regularly seeing. Duncan, go.
So I use AI quite often. I think I'll kind of touch on it from at least my perspective of this. I 100% agree with you, Jimmy, 9243. This
I think
does
that was
happen
9243.
a lot. I think what's kind of happening behind the scenes here is, depending on the tools you use, there is a lot of interest. There's a lot of people that are using these for various things, whether it be images, music, text, copywriting, etc. So they are throttling back the ability for people to use these algorithms, because it's not only just the people using it as is. Like, there's a lot of tools, plugins, applications, extensions that are all using this thing too. So the amount of data that is going through these tools on a daily basis is ridiculous. And they also have offered this for free for a lot of people. So what they've started to do is throttle back not only the amount of times that you can use the search, but how quickly it responds for free users. So I don't know if you're paid or free, but one of the reasons why you may be experiencing a lot of errors with this is simply due to volume and not having, the premium access to these tools in the process. So say you did have premium access and you're still seeing these errors, because I have premium access and I do. One of the main reasons for this is they force you to log in a lot. So if you have a window that's open and you've been writing in things on a Monday and you go back in there on Tuesday and you try to enter something in, it'll have an error. I see that quite often as well. So usually just refreshing or relogging in will do that and fix it. But what I try to do with these things, if it helps you, is I try to keep threads available for like different purposes. So if I am going to be writing content for whatever, a website, I would give it some kind of commands to kind of direct it. And I kind of keep that thread open and I name it like, this is my like website content creation for, whatever, this site, so that it remembers the previous entries and the guidance that I've given it before it starts to go and write things. So I've done this before with like case studies. I have like a case study format that I have in there. And my go-to is just to refresh the page if I go back in there and I haven't been there in a while, let it log me in, etc. And then I can kind of start giving it the data again and it spits it out. So I know what you're talking about. I've seen a lot of errors. I've also seen errors if I ask too many questions at once, because even on the paid plans, they throttle them back. So I know of another solution, but I think Ian's probably best to talk about it. So there's another really good solution. Ian, I'll let you take it away, but at least from my experience, the biggest reason is simply that there's an unbelievable amount of demand for this. This is also why you're seeing more and more paid options coming out and tiers going up because of that demand. And I think we'll continue to see this, and all you can really do is refresh the page, make sure you're logged in. Yeah, like you say, the cookies and browsers, pay for the more premium plans, or go ahead, Ian.
Yeah.
Before Ian, let me interject, Ian.
Yeah.
In the strong coffee drip first. Ian, before you get going, Duncan has a meeting he has to go to. So Duncan has to leave.
So let's go.
Okay. So Duncan, just before Ian gets started here, he's not going to finish in 3 minutes. I have to answer the other question too. We're okay if you just leave at some point.
Okay.
Feelings will not be hurt. But thank you for joining us today, Duncan.
My
We
pleasure.
really appreciate you tuning in. Ian, go ahead. What was the other solution possibly for Jim E?
So the solution that I've been using recently, I only found out about this in the last sort of month or so, is hosting a large language model yourself locally. And this has been possible for a long, long time, but in the past it's usually meant going onto GitHub and compiling it all yourself. There's a new tool that just came out within the last month or so, I believe, which is called Jan.ai. That's JAN.ai. You go to that website and you can download what is essentially a client for large language models. So you would download it and it works kind of like your email client would. And there's a browser in there where you can browse all the different large language models that are available, the size you want, whether you want the 70 billion parameter version, which is obviously a larger file, or a 7 billion parameter version, for example. There are several open source large language models on there, including Meta's Llama 2, which is the one that I've been using mostly. But yeah, you just download Jan.ai, you pick the large language model or models that you want to download into that client, and then you use it exactly as you would normally by logging into ChatGPT, for example, but you're hosting everything locally. You can use it offline. There's no slowdown. It's perhaps not quite as quick to come back with some of the answers, but it's also not quite as slow on the other occasions that you may be getting delays.
Consistent and it's stable, basically.
Yeah, so
Well, you definitely rule out any kind of like computer overload, cookie issues with things like that, because you're hosting it on your own computer.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, those problems just go away.
Yes. Now you do.
Speaking of going away,
fairly modern computer.
Oh,
I have to run.
Okay.
segue. Oh, whoa. Did you see how he did that?
Peace
You
out.
haven't left yet, Duncan. You're
We'll
still
talk
there.
soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, Duncan, it's time to go. So Ian,
yes.
so Jan.ai, you're putting one of these models on your computer.
Yeah.
So so you can run it whenever you want. You don't have to be online, etc.
Exactly.
I'd imagine it's so crazy for me to think that, back in the early days of the internet, we would sit there and wait for 10 minutes for a picture to download and you would see it going like this. And now all of a sudden you're putting a large language model on your desktop.
Yeah,
which is nuts.
absolutely. One thing that's probably worth bearing in mind is that obviously it is quite intensive on your computer as you're doing it. So maybe not something you want to leave running in the background all the time. Ideally, you'd want to make sure you've got enough RAM to run the model you want to use. If you, for example, wanted to use the 70 billion parameter version of Llama 2, then you're probably not going to be able to do that on just a Chromebook. You would really want to make sure that your computer is up to the task. But to answer the question about errors and slowdown and crashes and things like that, it is an alternative option.
Definite option. So do something like Ian's doing, where you're actually recreating this on your own computer, or like Duncan was saying, there's the paid options, as well as, if you're sending through a bunch of queries at once, maybe it's better to spoon feed it and help it along, as opposed to just throwing a bunch of stuff at it and saying, I hope you can figure this out.
Yes, indeed.